Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. So today I want to share with you guys some of my thoughts on the second Nathanuary read for this year called My Kinsman, Major Molineux by Nathaniel Hawthorne. This year for Nathanuary, we read two short stories. The first one was Young Goodman Brown, and I have done an analysis video that you can find up in the cards up there. But I wanted to come on and talk a little bit about this second story as well. If you have not yet read the story and you don't want spoilers, then be sure to pause here and go to the link in my description box where you can find the story all available for you online in a PDF. It's about 17 pages, so it won't take you very long to read it, and then you can come back and watch the video. But if you don't care to read the story and you just want me to sum it up for you, I will. So the story takes place in colonial America before the Revolution. Hawthorne implies that the story takes place around the 1730s. However, as you read through the story, you realize that it's kind of addressing a lot of the events that happened clear up right before the Revolution. So the 1730s and several decades after. It starts with a young man named Robin who crosses the river into another colony from his own colony. And we don't know which colony he came from or which one he has entered into. But there are hints that he may have entered into the Boston area. He has all kinds of just like hope and youthful enthusiasm. And he is looking for his kinsman, Major Molineux, which I think is actually like his uncle or something. He starts walking through the town, it's nighttime, and he's asking everyone, have you seen my kinsman, Major Molineux? Do you know where he is? Do you know where he lives? How can I find him? Blah, blah, blah. He's asking all these different people. Some people are kind to him, but then laugh as he walks away. You get the impression they're laughing regarding this kinsman. We have some people who are not super kind to him. One person dismisses him, saying that he has authority and doesn't have the time to talk to him. He encounters a woman of the night who he thinks is probably just his kinsman's housekeeper, and instead she's actually a prostitute, but she's nice. And then anyway, all along the way, as he asks about his kinsman, everyone is just kind of like, no one is really giving him any answers, and most of them are actually laughing at the idea. He holds his kinsman up in a high regard, and he assumes that any sort of inconveniences or difficulties that he is facing in trying to reunite with him are going to all be resolved once he gets with his kinsman, who has apparently a respectable name, a little bit of authority, and probably some money. And so he's a little bit cocky about his relation to this guy, Major Molineux. Finally, he meets up with someone who says, you know what, if you just sit here for a little bit, your kinsman is going to come by very shortly. And I think that you will be made aware of where he is. So Robin sits with the guy and they talk a little bit, and various symbolic things happen. Eventually, Robin hears quite a commotion going on down the road. And before long, a parade appears, led by one of the people that Robin sees in the village as he's, trying to find his kinsman. And then a cart with Major Molineux up on top, tarred and feathered. And everyone's laughing. And Robin is remembering all of the people that had laughed at him throughout the evening as he had been trying to find his kinsman. And everyone's laughing now. And it makes him start laughing. And he laughs and laughs and laughs as well and joins in with this. The cart stops there, so Robin can get a good look at his kinsman all tarred and feathered. And then it continues on down the road. So then Robin is kind of like, well, guess that's not happening. I guess I'll go back home. So he asks the man who's been kind to him, how to get back, how to get back home. And he's like, I'll tell you if you want, but I would encourage you to stick around here a few more days, because you may find out that you can get by without your kinsman, Major Molineux. On the surface, it's a super weird story, and you're like, what is going on here? But with a little bit of historical insight, I think that this story paints a really great picture of the the attitudes that were leading up to the American Revolution. It highlights the way that different people were thinking about different things, but still all living in community. It highlights the break that America made with England, and how some people, while they did value the idea of freedom and thought it was really great, they also thought it was kind of a pipe dream and wasn't really going to happen. And so to take that huge risk of, revolting against the king, I guess, was too much of a risk for them. They didn't want to lose their businesses or their families or their standing or their lives. And so while it was a great idea, no, I don't think we're going to go there. I think we'll just play it safe here. But then there were others who were like, we're risking everything because this is just really important, right, as far as freedom goes. And it just highlights those different attitudes. I don't feel really like Hawthorne took a side. I think he was just kind of bringing up I think he was just sort of bringing out the points, right, of the things that led up to and took place during the Revolution. So this story is, once you read a little bit about the Sons of Liberty, that's when this story really comes together. Because you start to pull out things like, at one point in the story, a man comes up to Robin and starts speaking to him in a weird language and saying all kinds of odd things to him. And Robin does not have an appropriate response for the guy, so the guy sort of curses him and runs away. And that alludes to the Sons of Liberty, who would speak to each other in passwords, right, to try to see if you were part of the group, if you understood this language and had the password or whatever. So that was one sign. But ultimately, the tar and feather on the cart, that was the Sons of Liberty, 100%. That's exactly the kind of stuff that they would do and parade people around. So once you get to that point, you can kind of go back and see some even deeper themes. Some of the things I noticed in the story were the diversity in the people that he was encountering as he walked through the village that evening looking for his kinsman. He saw people that were happy, that were dressed up in costume, that were dressed up in bright colors. They were humming tunes, and he kind of was comparing them to his duller, quieter self at some point. And it's actually interesting because when you start off the story, it's a very positive sort of feeling that you get about Robin. But as the story goes on and you yourself start comparing him to the different things that he's encountering, he becomes a little more melancholy and sort of stick in the mud-ish. Your perspective on him changes. He's contrasted with this town that he's walking through, and he becomes a little bit more plain. He's seen diversity in the different types of houses. There are little tiny houses and houses leaning up against one another. And then there are larger houses, and there are wooden houses, and there are stone houses. And there's a diversity there, which I think represents a diversity of people and classes all living together. He's encountering different personalities and different reactions to him and to his questions. This is not the old crusty England where everything and everyone must fall into line with their proper class system and in their proper place and with their proper loyalties. Right here, the people explore individuality. Now, Robin is coming over from another colony. He has not come over from England at this point, but you get the impression that he has been raised to be loyal to England. And so being in this new colony with this new way is kind of his first introduction to the idea that there could be another way. A lot of the language that's used in this story points to these themes as well. For instance, the woman of the night has a sly look of freedom in her eye. It says that it triumphs over Robin's. Weird turn of phrase, except in the context of comparing those seeking liberty and those seeking to remain loyal. It makes sense. You see symbolism in the use of color. There is a man who ends up being that man I talked about leading the parade. When Robin encounters him, he has his face painted half black and half red. And both of these are pretty scary, intimidating colors, right? But it does symbolize that division between loyalty and liberty. And one of the ways that we see that is because of the wording used. It says that the man's face was party colored. That is spelled P-A-R-T-I -colored, right? And usually refers to something like Mardi Gras or a circus or, jesters, clowns, that kind of thing. And instead, this was spelled P-A-R-T-Y, colored, as in political parties, right? And so definitely a pun there to pick up on. I think this guy represents a choice that Robin was, going to be invited to make, especially at the end there where he leads the parade. And the author actually describes him as representing war, fire, sword, and mourning. We see symbolism in Robin's name, right? The name Robin is a cheery name. It's a friendly name, and it means bright fame or shining fame. And I think that he represents a bit of hope, a bit of naivety. We are also reminded of Shakespeare's character Puck, who is also called Robin. In A Midsummer Night's Dream, Shakespeare calls Robin shrewd or shrewd youth. And that word is used several times in this short story to describe this Robin as shrewd. Even at the very end, when the kind man tells him, hey, why don't you stick around a little while and see if you might be able to make it here without your kinsman, he says, you being a shrewd youth, why don't you see if you might be able to survive here without your kinsman. We see Robin kind of torn between his choice. At one point, he's thinking back on kind of what his family is probably doing at home. It sounds like he got turned out of the home, and he asks himself, am I here or am I there? And so when he does that, he recognizes kind of this long, wide street opening up before him, just kind of stretching wide, right? Representing a path that he can take if he chooses to. The language used as the parade continues on kind of shows us that Hawthorne is trying to draw out a sense of melancholy about these inevitable political changes that are taking place for England. When he's talking about Major Molineux, he uses terms like some dead potentate, mighty no more, but majestic still in his agony, and trampling all on an old man's heart. And so it's in places like that where he seems a bit sympathetic and uses a little bit of sympathetic language toward the old, country and the old ways, that I feel like he's not necessarily taking a side here in this story. He's just kind of presenting things the way that they are. He spent a lot of time in England and was even a representative to the country. He actually served as the U.S. consul and was in Liverpool. Apparently, it was considered to be this super prestigious position, and next to being at the embassy in London, according to his wife. So I think that, it's not necessarily that he had loyalties, just that he had sympathies, and he wasn't really, knocking either point of view. But the gentleman at the end of this story states what I think is the major theme when he says, perhaps you may rise in the world without the help of your kinsman, Major Molineux. In other words, America doesn't need England's help to rise up to its full potential. And that was definitely a hard pill to swallow, right? Ironically, though, I would like to add here, isn't it funny how so many of us Americans are so obsessed with British culture at this point? How many of us say we'd so much rather read British literature than American literature? How so many of us romanticize the English countryside while thumbing our nose at the American countryside? Are we hypocrites? No. We're romantic idealists. And just because you visit a place for a couple of weeks, whether it be England or America, does not necessarily mean that you want to live your entire life there under a government different than what you are used to. All right, that's all the political talk for today, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this analysis video of my kinsman, Major Molineux. I really enjoyed Nathanuary this year. It was so fun to have all the conversations and just to get the insights from others who are reading these stories alongside me. That was fantastic. Very much looking forward to Nathanuary for next year, and I think I might even stick with this idea of doing a couple of short stories over a full-length novel. Maybe just do the novels once every few years, because there are way more short stories than novels, and it's really fun to do these little mini analysis things, right? And still have lots of time to read all the other stuff in the month. And anyway, that's what I'm kicking around anyway. Hope you're all doing well. I will see you soon. Bye-bye.